In May 2020, I graduated high school, and in August 2020, I started college. For many, this was an extremely painful year, but for me, it led to the most formative years of my life. I'm sure we would all love to forget what it was like to both be a young adult leaving high school and the pandemic, but I believe we can all agree on two things. One, the pandemic was a historical moment in time where we saw the best and worst of each other. Two, young adult you knew very little about yourself and even less about the world around you. We'll flash back to 2020. I was a senior in high school. I'm sure we all remember what senior year should be. It should be a year of celebration. It should be closure for all the critical aspects of your life up until that point while setting you up for your next phase of life. Well, unfortunately, for me and countless other class of 2020 graduates, there was no closure, no setup, and the world was changing so drastically that no one really knew how to do anything. All senior recitals, dinners, dances, proms, parties, classes, canceled. And for the icing on top of this already pretty terrible cake, we had to spend the foreseeable future in isolation. This ended up being 5 months without the things I considered critical to my identity, but also 5 months where I got to rest and be with myself. So at this point in my life, I was wondering the simple yet complex question about human existence. What is identity? Now, there's a whole bunch of different definitions, but generally speaking, identity is your sense of self and the characteristics you use to define said sense of self. This can be a whole bunch of stuff. This can be your memories, your appearance, your experiences, the people around you, or your environment. They all work in tandem with each other, so your identity affects your experiences, and your experiences affect your identity. Up until 2020, I had felt really good and strong about my identity. I was a dancer, a performer, musician, a family member, a friend. I was an average student. I considered myself an extremely hard worker, but never really a leader. Oftentimes, I struggled to envision any future in which anyone took my opinions or wants seriously because for 18 years, I was too young to know better. Everyone knew what was best for me and who I was. So when quarantine first rolled around, it was actually kind of nice. It was like a 2-week vacation. I'm pretty sure I just slept for the first couple weeks. I picked up hobbies that I haven't in a while, caught up on TV shows. A few weeks in though, however, I was starting to lose hope on anything being picked up again, and I was well rested and bored. So I decided to download an app called TikTok. I'm not here to say whether it's a good or bad app, but it was one I spent a lot of time on and still kind of do. At this time, I had just left Instagram because it was becoming extremely inauthentic. I was sick of seeing curated images of people's perfect lives. I had joined the app to see pieces of my loved ones' lives, but often left it feeling worse about mine. So TikTok was actually a nice change of pace. It was funny, entertaining. At times, it was even educational. There's communities and people of every demographic on the app, so I had firsthand exposure to different stories, information that I've never been exposed to before. However, a few weeks into being on TikTok, I was starting to realize I was starting to develop these insecurities that I've never had before. Never once in my life did I ever look at my face and wish that I had bigger lips or question whether I had a welcoming aura, but now, because of TikTok, I was. But lucky for me, and all of us really, there are countless influencers and products and services you can buy into that will fix your insecurities. There's millions wellness, fitness, and beauty influencers ever ready on TikTok to tell you how to work out, what to wear, what products to buy, and if you follow them, your life will be changed. There were people telling you what supplements you should buy, what plastic surgeries make you look younger. There's professionals on the app telling you you think and feel the way you do because you're secretly depressed, anxious, traumatized, gay, autistic. You name it, you're probably it. Never once in my life had I ever thought about any of those things. At first, buying a product here or there or following an influencer every once in a while wasn't the end of the world. But there was a point where I was becoming completely overwhelmed. I had never felt so much insecurity in my life up until this point. Pre-2020, I was a happy, confident person. I thought I knew who I was. But now I was left feeling empty. And I was questioning why I felt so much apathy towards this app, yet still used it regularly. Eventually, I got sick of doom scrolling on my phone and developing insecurities, so I replaced the behavior with taking walks. I'm talking hours-long walks around my neighborhood, listening to my favorite music. This became my first step into figuring out who I am, purposely spending time alone. This became my time to listen to music, process, grieve, and reflect on everything going on around me, something I still do to this day. It was on this walk that I discovered what was wrong with me, why I was feeling so empty, and why I was so apathetic towards everything. I realized that my self-worth and my identity was completely reliant on the things I did and the people I was around. It wasn't until the pandemic where I couldn't do any of those things that I realized that I did not know who I was. That's why I was feeling empty, and that's why I was relying on social media to tell me who I was, what to buy, what to wear, what made me cool. And this was not a fun realization to have. It rocked my world, and I didn't really know how to proceed. I realized my confidence came from a place of superiority, and my quietness came from a place of wanting to blend in, not alienate people away from me. However, when the pandemic hit, I realized I lost my confidence. I was more quiet than ever, and my inner dialogue was extremely self-deprecating. However, I realized maybe once I got to college, I'll figure it out. I'll find new passion, new purpose, I have new friends, problem solved. However, once I got here, the feelings were just exasperated. College did not tell me who I was. If anything, they offered more questions about my identity. But once again, I figured I'm young. My reality had changed, but maybe I'll just wait it out again. Eventually, in over 4 years, I'll figure out who I am. Confidence will hit me, and I'll be this new person. 2 years later, though, we were starting to exit the pandemic. Things were starting to go back to normal. Something I was once looking forward to, I found I was now dreading. So much had changed for me over the course of these 2 years. Mentally, physically, emotionally, I was not the same person. I was completely radicalized by the pandemic and had thought everyone else was too, but when everything went back to normal, so did most people and practices. I felt like there were two versions of myself that I was struggling to bridge. I no longer felt purpose for my pre-COVID high school self, but also did not know who I was or who I wanted to be moving forward. I was 2 years into college, halfway done, and feeling as apathetic as I was when I started. Lucky for me, it was around this time that one of my favorite recording artists, Beyonce, released her newest single, Break My Soul. It had themes of resilience, finding new motivation in life, letting go of everything that doesn't serve you while embracing what does, all while remembering that you have everything you need in you to succeed. You just have to reinvest your energy into it. I immediately clicked with this song and naturally listened to it on repeat and for the next month until the entire Renaissance album was released. Due to copyright reasons, we're not actually going to listen to any of it, but I encourage everyone to take a listen eventually. There were themes and songs about being confident without comparing yourself to others, being comfortable in your skin even when there's other forces trying to tear you apart, escaping the binary ways in which we view ourselves and others, and what it means to live a life full of love, joy, and happiness. This was an extremely liberating experience for me to listen to. I was in a period of my life where I needed to hear these messages, and I don't think it was just necessary for me, but I think it was important for culture as a whole. The time following 2020 and COVID was full of tension, pain, and hate. In 2 years, we fought with our neighbors about whether or not Black lives mattered. We watched states enact legislation that actively villainized the LGBTQ+ community. We debated, and still do debate, women's rights to bodily autonomy. Among other social issues, we saw pain, grief, exploitation, and violence on a grand scale. So this album coming out not only called for a rebirth of culture, but it called for a rediscovery of meaning, creativity, and love. The philosophy of that album centered around finding that meaning, love, confidence, and creativity within yourself. Something that I knew I wanted to achieve, but wasn't sure how to do it. And I was already familiar with implementing philosophies for music into my life. Fun fact about me, I'm named after Bob Marley, the legendary artist that believed that music could change the world. He sang songs about standing up to injustices. He preached love and unity and not letting things out of your control worry you. All things my parents actively implemented into me and my siblings' lives. So using music as a therapeutic tool was something I was always familiar with, but this case, I did not really know how to move forward. I knew the insecurity I was dealing with was coming from a fear of how others perceived me. Intellectually, that was easy to figure out, but actually overcoming it was a completely different challenge. So my next step was to figure out, who do I want to be in the future, and who am I right now? So I bought a journal, and I wrote out every single thing I wanted for my future self, personal to professional, and then on another page, I wrote out all the things I would use to describe myself now. After I wrote all that out, I then went back to see what was holding me back from achieving these things and why I chose these different descriptive words. Oftentimes, the inner dialogue that was holding me back from achieving things revolved around other people being more qualified than me, questioning why anyone would ever choose me for anything, among other self-deprecating things. And when I went back to see the words I chose, I realized it was the words I thought other people would use to describe me. It wasn't actually my voice, but it was the collection of other people's voices instead. The common theme among all of that being perception and comparison. In this moment, I realized that I was rejecting myself and putting myself down before others could. Something that worked well enough for me up until this point, but was now actively holding me back. I wondered how much longer I would let this fear of rejection or failure get in the way of what I wanted. How much longer would I listen to the Renaissance album wishing I had that skill and confidence? So it was this day that I decided that confidence was not something achieved, but a choice. Confidence and security is not something you wake up and have, but something that you actively have to pursue. It's a state of mind, not an achievement. And the Renaissance album became key for me during this time, because every time I started to put myself out there in tough situations where I could be perceived or judged or rejected, I would put on a song from the album, I would take a deep breath, I would figure out where my nerves were, talk to myself about why the nerves were there, and then I would just let myself dance. I would move around my apartment not caring how I looked, knowing I probably looked goofy most of the time, but just letting myself feel the music and move around. After, I would collect myself, then go do what I needed to do. I found that this 5-minute practice fundamentally changed how I performed. When I was in stressful situations, when I did this, I realized that I talked better about myself. I held myself better. I was more confident. My posture, everything improved for the better. So this practice, simple, but life-changing. This, surprisingly, was the easiest part. The next part and the real challenge was figuring out how to maintain it. Because at the end of the day, I am a product of my environment. I will always have that little self-deprecating voice in my head, and I will be around people who perceive me, make assumptions about me, and judge me. The real challenge is, how do I maintain it against those odds? The real question for me was to find out, how do I maintain my confidence when I felt that I was around people trying to dim my light in order to make theirs feel brighter? And this once again came down to choice. I will never stop people from perceiving me, making assumptions about me, or judging me, but I can choose how I respond to it. And there's 2 ways. 1, I can listen and I can adapt, because I'm not a perfect person. If it's coming from a place of good faith or someone that I trust, I should listen and make those changes in my life. Or 2, I can choose to ignore it. Understanding that the way we think and feel about other people is a direct reflection on ourselves. I know that we will never fully understand another human without fully understanding who we are. So this is a choice to not let comments made from insecurity affect my security. But this is incredibly challenging, because most days I wake up and I'm not feeling joyful, confident, meaningful, or even happy sometimes. Oftentimes I dread the things I have to do, the people I have to interact with, but this once again becomes a challenge to wake up every day and to find opportunities for confidence, meaning, and joy. And this has led a complete renewal to the self. My life has drastically improved because of this practice. Personally and professionally, everything has improved for the better. I'm proud to say that it brought me to this stage today, giving a TED Talk, which is really freaking cool. I am graduating with high honors in a few weeks from college. I am going to be getting my doctorate in clinical psychology in August. I've had multiple amazing on-campus leadership opportunities that all collectively led to 2 separate awards for my leadership abilities, as well as I have worked many amazing internships off campus that have been amazing and extremely educational for me. Personally, I'm proud to say that I feel like it has improved all the relationships around me as well. I found that whenever I'm more confident and secure in myself, it leaves more space to be an active listener and to be there for others. My ego doesn't get in the way of other people's achievements, likes, or dislikes. It was something that I didn't realize was a problem until this practice. I realized that we can only empower and uplift others if we empower and uplift ourselves. Overall, my quality of life has drastically improved. I spend more nights happy at laying in bed thinking of all the joyful things I did during the day instead of laying in bed with my heart racing, anxious about how I interact with people or what do I have to do tomorrow. This has led to a complete renewal of the self, knowing that I will not let anyone or anything stop me from what I want to do because I know who I am and I know who I want. So, as my time here comes to a close today, I want to thank all of you for listening to me talk about some of my favorite things in the world: psychology, philosophy, and Beyonce. I hope you all take time today to reflect about the different things that have created your identity, positive or negative. I hope more people leave here today choosing confidence, joy, and meaning, all while remembering that comparison robs us from all those experiences. This takes an intentional change in how you think and feel, but this change is made significantly easier when you have a soundtrack that reminds you of who you are and who you hope to become. I'm going to leave you all here today with one final question. What does the soundtrack for your life sound like? Thank you.